Hi, Jeffrey. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you? It's great to
I'm
be here.
fine, thank you. Yeah, lovely to meet you. And where are you at the moment?
I'm in Long Island, just outside of New York City,
Yeah.
and that's where I've lived my whole life.
Oh, okay. Grew up there.
Yes,
Oh, wonderful. And what is the situation like there? Are you back doing concerts?
I am. I'm vaccinated since February, so I actually performed with some orchestras since March and did a recording a few weeks ago of Rhapsody
Okay.
in Blue,
Yeah.
and now just preparing a lot of new things for the fall. So I've been teaching online. Things are okay.
Mm,
I still stay masked when I'm out,
mm,
only just because it's become normal for me. And why
mm.
pick up anything else? I mean, if it's okay to
Exactly.
wear it,
Yeah.
okay, it's okay.
Used to it now. So
Absolutely.
actually, I spoke to a singer, and he said to me that he hasn't been ill all winter, so it was an advantage for him to wear the
True.
mask. So he's
True.
contemplating and to wear it in the future as well. I think it will be
Yeah,
more normal for us to do it now,
I think
Yeah.
so. You know,
Oh,
it's.
mm,
Uh, there have been many situations where I felt that it's probably safer to.
yeah.
When
Mm,
I remember traveling to Japan
mm.
in the 1990s, and it was Japan Airlines, and all the Japanese passengers were wearing masks.
Oh, okay.
And in fact, a very dear friend of mine is a composer, Ellen Tate Swillick. After I performed one of her pieces, she was on the same flight with us going
Mm.
back, and she wore a mask. She says, I always wear a mask on the plane. And I thought, why? Now I know why.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
she
yeah.
did this. This is 20 years ago she did this.
Mm, mm.
But, it depends on personal comfort
Yeah,
zone. So,
yeah. No, that's true. Nobody can see my lipstick when I wear a mask, so I don't think I'll be wearing it. Either that or not buy buy
Exactly. So
lipstick.
you're in Vienna. I was in Vienna only for one day in my life back in 1983. I took a bus from former Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
I traveled from where we were doing concerts. A Juilliard formed trio. We were friends, and I stayed at the Yugoslavian cellist's sister's home by
Yeah.
bus. I went by bus all the way through the night to
Mm,
Vienna and spent a whole day there. Went to so many different places and then took the bus back.
mm,
And I loved it. My mom's mother
mm.
was from Austria-Hungary, but the Austrian
Oh,
part.
okay.
Yeah, I have Austrian in me, um,
Okay. Yeah, so you
and
have to come and visit again.
I would love to. I would love to
Yeah.
play Mozart and
Mm.
just so many
It's
dreams yet to be fulfilled.
okay. But tell me about this new project. I have spoken to Farhad,
Yes,
and he's the composer. And
yes.
uh, are you the conductor of the
No,
Windsor
no,
Symphony or the?
no. That's Robert. Robert Franz
Okay.
is the
Oh,
conductor
I see.
there. I met Robert in 2006, 7 or so, when
Yeah.
he was conductor of the Mansfield Symphony in the United States in Ohio. We were doing Lowell Lieberman's third piano concerto for a commissioning project I created way back then.
Mm,
I've been doing these things for. I started in 1998 to assemble the first largest commissioning project with over 20 some odd orchestras, 26, 7. Uh, and then further down the line kept doing more, and that's where I met Robert.
mm,
So when Farhad reached out to me
mm,
with his solo piano pieces, we began to talk
mm,
basically on Messenger, just
mm,
everything online. It's amazing.
mm,
And he told me he was living in Iran, and he told me he was a part-time pharmacist too. I mean, he's a brilliant guy, but he was so respectful, so kind. I liked what he was saying. I liked what he was writing. Um, and I'm always looking for uh, commissioning projects that are different, that serve a purpose in the now. And there's been different kinds, all different kinds of projects and different styles of music. But I thought, why not a piece of music reflecting his ancestry, Persian folklore. I said, we have Beethoven's choral fantasy for piano, orchestra, and chorus. And there's a movement of the Busoni concerto. There's the Rio Grande, but it's not. I don't think it's with orchestra. Uh, there are some pieces, not much. And I had commissioned William Bolcom, wonderful American composer, to compose a work for piano, orchestra, and chorus, which was premiered and recorded with me and Pacific Symphony with Carl St. Clair and Pacific Chorale in California. It's a wonderful work. And then another composer who was only 25 at the time was Jake Runnestad, who I met in Minneapolis. And I asked him to write something for piano, orchestra, and chorus. And he chose the topic of veterans returning from war and being war-torn and suffering from the trauma of war, as we call it, PTSD these days. And he wrote Dreams of the Fallen, which I'm hoping to record within the next year or two. It offers a new work for piano, orchestra, and chorus, but the pianist serving a purpose. And I said to Farhad, why don't you, piano concertos are wonderful. Gosh, we have plenty of wonderful piano concertos, but I've always felt it was above and beyond everything else I've done classically and traditionally. I've always felt this pull to create projects that bring new music to the repertoire, not just for now, but even more so for when I'm not around in the future. We need to have representative works from present time. And I asked him, how about piano, orchestra, and chorus? And he's like, well, I don't know, And I said, why don't you do some digging and look for a story of Persian folklore. Look for something that has text in it that you could hear being sung. Imagine it being performed with a choir. And, make it like a piano concerto. Piano plays a big part as a narrator almost, or just a piano concerto, but with chorus providing the story. And it took him not too long, and he came up with this wonderful story. And he composed it rather quickly. And I get this sense, it's very difficult to decide when a project can happen and if it can be embraced and performed. Some of them have to happen because, not because you think many orchestras will grab onto it quickly. That's not always the important thing. But because he was not known in the US and in other places, I thought, let's do this. Write it because you want to. Write it because you want to open doors for your work. Some composers who are older and more seasoned, of course, they know they are going to command a certain fee, so the burden of doing that is on me, and I've done that. It's a challenge, but I could get a sense if it's going to work or not. So with Farhad, I said, you have to write this because you want to, and then I'll see what to do. So I was in discussion, as soon as he told me that Maestro Franz had already been a fan of his, I said, well, there's your first stop. Just out of respect and allegiance to Maestro Franz, he should be the first person that we approach about this, because he is one of your fans. It would seem strange to me to go elsewhere. And I thought it might be interesting to do a project where the world premiere would not be in the United States, rather coming from the outside in, and eventually find its way here, which it probably will. It's that good. I think it's a very interesting work. I have, in my mind, I just see names of conductors that immediately I will bring this to, but not yet. So,
But
uh,
it's a love story, I heard.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, which is wonderful.
And
I
he
love
writes
a love
so
story.
well. Oh, it's beautiful. And it will be in his native language.
Yeah.
And the piano part's really very, very good. There's a part toward the end where he does chordal melodic writing in the piano, and I don't even know if he realizes, but it for me it kind of reflects a style of American compositional technique harmonically of middle of the 20th century. It's very interesting, but it's very beautiful. And I like that in a way that he incorporates that, but then it gets sweeping and beautiful and romantic, and some of the thorny things in there are thorny because they need to be, but it's accessible. You could understand it. You can actually walk out singing some of these melodies. To me, that's the most important thing. You want the
Yeah.
audience to just, I can't get that out of my ear. I still
Yeah.
hear it, you know,
That's
soulful, very beautiful.
wonderful. Yeah.
He's great.
So, but tell me about this. So you're a pianist,
Yes,
and I read about the Windsor Orchestra, and tell
yes.
me,
No,
are
no,
you part of this orchestra?
no. It's an orchestra in Canada, and Maestro Franz is their music director.
Okay.
So I brought the idea of doing the world premiere of Farhad's piece with Maestro Franz conducting the Windsor Symphony and the chorus.
Okay.
So, of course, it took time for the meetings to take place, and we had plenty of time because he was writing the music, and these processes have to take time. Uh, I don't like to rush them. I like to. I'm a very prompt person. I know. I hate being late to things. I like getting things done well in advance than when I need to ever have a deadline. So knowing how much time I need to get something done. So I like having the luxury of time, and I don't like composers to be pushed or feel they have. I mean, they get deadlines anyway, but I didn't want him to feel pushed because it's a project, especially piano, orchestra, and chorus. That's pretty big stuff. That's a lot of music to do and to
Yeah.
think about and where to integrate the various players. So I didn't want him to feel pushed. I certainly don't get involved in the process because it's their baby. You know,
Yeah.
I until they give me music and say, "Can you try it?" and then I start to get involved. But I
Yeah.
do it in a way that not just for myself, but how will the conductor be able to follow what you write for the piano?
Mm.
Or how can another pianist in 50 years from now play it and not feel like, oh, that's too awkward, I can't play it. I want other people to play these pieces in the future. So I try to make it workable so that it gets what the composer wants to be heard. Some things could be awkward, like, well, let's fix this, let's put this in that hand, do you need that there? Or let's do a little more here. And we end up going back and forth, which is, it's really fun in a way. I mean, I'm not the composer, but I feel as though they allow me to be part of the compositional process for the final result. And even then, things get changed or
So,
whatever.
so you have the ear to hear, or the structure of it to know how it's going to work.
You hear it in your mind. Not so much the orchestra part because I feel I'm hands off from that. Whatever they write for the orchestra or the chorus, that they have to work out with the conductors of each entity, not me. Uh, Unless I feel as though something is too loud and smothering the piano part, or vice versa, or whatever. Uh, that happens in rehearsals. But basically, it's the composer's job to make sure that all the different components fit together, and he consults with each person separately so that it works. And conductors could see the whole thing and hear the whole thing in their head, so they have a better sense of it. For me, I'm more focused on the piano part to make sure it works for me, and then it
Yeah.
works for future pianists.
Mm. So when do you think this will be performed? This piece.
I think they're working toward the 2022-23 season. So not this coming year,
Mm.
unless they find that they could do it in the spring. I mean, I'm learning the piece. I'll have it ready. It depends, but if they're announcing like a season in 6 month intervals and they feel the chorus is ready to come back, fine. It's up to the conductor. It's up to the organization. I'll just do it when they're ready. But I think they might lean more toward the following year, based on a September to September concert season. So it could be the fall, winter 2022 or spring 23. It depends. I mean, I think it'll be not too long from now. We're getting there, but it has to be safe. When they feel comfortable having chorus on stage singing,
Okay.
in
But
a
yeah.
post-COVID world, will be okay.
Is it usually does it take so long, or how long does it take, for example, if you get a piece like this to study, for everything to be done?
Well, once he has the entire piece finished, he will send the score to the conductor, who will then share the chorus score with the choral director, and they just decide different things. I think it's also that they get everything well in advance so that the chorus has enough time to learn their parts, which will be in the language of that Farhad chooses, and that's important so that they learn the way to speak the language and sing the language of the text. So that's a challenge, and that's up to the choral director. And the orchestra parts then would be given well in advance to the orchestra to learn their parts, so that orchestra does what they do, choir does what they do, piano does what he does. We do it all together then at the rehearsals, and then you have a concert. So that's how it works.
Yeah, but we never realized that it takes so long, and that this process that it has to go through.
Well, it sometimes doesn't. You don't have the luxury of that time.
Yeah.
Sometimes pieces
Mm.
are written quickly. I'm learning a new work that will be October 7 with the Dallas Symphony. New work honoring Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the late Supreme Court Justice, being composed by Ellen Taves Willick. And I approached Ellen about doing this because she's written two other pieces for me before, and she really liked the idea of this project. It's a composer has to light the candle inside them and say, oh, "I'm on fire. I love this." So she's composing this now. She's in the third act. She calls them acts of this piece for piano, mezzo soprano, and orchestra. And Denise Graves will be the mezzo soprano, and she's incredible. She was Justice Ginsburg's favorite singer, actually. So that will be October. So that we don't have luxury of time. I just spoke late last night with Ellen, and I said, make me busier in the second movement. So there's a part where she feels she could insert the piano to beef up the sound before a certain quiet spot. And so that's a work in progress. She's working on the third section with text by a poet. So it's a challenge for her, but she could get it done quickly. But we all have to learn our parts quicker than having the luxury of, say, a year or a year and a half. I mean, that's luxurious, but you do need time. Sometimes with multi-orchestra commissioning projects, I like to have 2 years to bring in as many orchestras as possible. So that's another topic going into 2023 now with some
So
projects.
you basically coordinate this from composers. They give you the score, or they give you the project or whatever, and you coordinate the orchestras, or how do you do it?
Well, oh, okay. I'll try to make this brief. The way
Yeah.
it happens is if I decide on a specific project or a composer, I will discuss it with the composer and say, I have this in mind. And then what happens is, very quickly you have to come up with their fee. So you need to either get all the money to pay the composer from the orchestras or from donors, or combination of both, which is typically the case. So I usually use social media. I create project group pages on social media to let people know it exists. And then, based on the topic, knowing who might be interested to contribute toward the composer's fee. So basically, I'm a fundraiser.
Oh, I
I
see.
I don't get paid for being a fundraiser because I end up playing the pieces.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a project I create, and I work through a nonprofit, so all the funding can go through the nonprofit organization, and so the donors are able to use that as a contribution, and then the composers get paid in increments from that. So we have what's called commissioning agreements, and each one has been different. I've done about 10 or 11, 12 of them, and they're all different, and there are different terms on payment, how much they get up front, how much they receive when they deliver the score to me or to the orchestra, and then upon final delivery. So that's how it works. It's a business, and I have to make sure that every component is covered in the agreement that protects me and protects the donors and protects the composers. And then the orchestras sign addendums. So then I start to carefully figure out which orchestras that project might fit. It could be orchestras that have composed that performed that composer's music before, or have not, or the topic fits for what they're doing in their programming. And when I started doing these, we didn't have the luxury of social media or
Oh,
even email so much. It was phone calls, just
mm,
telephone calls, and calling conductor friends. And then as technology developed, I was able to utilize email and websites and then social media. It made it much easier to reach more people, more donors, more orchestras, conductors. So that's how I've been doing these for so many years.
but in America, I think it's so different because you have to, um, all orchestras have to uh, operate with um, sponsorships or donors, or it is not state funded.
That's right.
So, do you think musicians in America have more a business sense, that they, that they think more of in that way? And I think in Europe it's almost less that they so aware of business, the business side of it.
I don't know. I can't speak for my colleagues or how they think, especially orchestra musicians or soloists. I don't know their mindset about that. I just know for myself that knowing that it takes X amount of dollars to raise the fee for a composer to write a new piece, specific piece based on duration and size of score, timeliness. Um, I know that I need to reach out to donors and to orchestras, and that's the way it works here. Now, it's unusual to have Canadian orchestras involved in projects, but I've been able to do that with William Bolcom's piece. Calgary Philharmonic and Chorus was part of that commission and paid toward it. And also the Niagara Symphony was part of Ellen Tapes Willick's Shadows Concerto about 10 years ago. So they were able to sneak in an American composer because in Canada mostly they foster Canadian composers. Now with Windsor, since Farhad is from Iran and he has a relationship with that orchestra, it made it a little easier for Maestro Franz and his staff to consider it. And they'll pay him a small honorarium toward composing it. And I did assure Farhad that, you're doing this It's not like a typical commissioning agreement, but I was able to secure some sponsorship from a donor who was very interesting. She has contributed to other commissions in the past. And when I told her what I was doing, I told her this is about an Iranian composer. She immediately was, I want to do this. I want to help. I want to be part of this.
Wonderful.
Because
Yeah.
she had friends that she knew in Texas in the late 1970s who were visiting the United States, and they were students, I believe, and she just wanted to help this composer. And so she's
Wonderful.
one of the yeah, one of his donors. So that's how it works. In Europe, I have brought in orchestras in Germany and in Finland to be in commissioning projects, and they would just then send their share fee toward the composer's fee to them directly through their bank or whatever. But they were part of the commissioning process and would do the official European premiere of the piece. But yes, I believe because of the state run, I don't know how it works with commissioning new music in
Yeah.
Europe. I mean,
I don't know. Yeah.
let's say I'm a pianist living in Vienna and I want so and so to compose a new piano concerto. I would imagine I would have to ask the orchestras if there are funds in their budgets allocated toward commissioning new music. It's as simple as that. It's a lot easier that way if they have that kind of budget. Whereas in the States, you have to go through the boards and they have to see if it fits the budget they have and can they afford it. It's not like they are required to or that they have a specific budget for commissioning new music. Orchestras do. But I'm just curious if in Europe they do have that in their budget, and it's easier because if they
Yeah.
like the project, it's much
Yeah.
easier to secure the funds.
Yeah. I don't know how it works here, but I know in, my series Moments in Lockdown that I did, and I spoke to many American artists as well. And, you get the idea that they don't get support. So you don't get support from the state. So you have to sort out this. And I just think maybe because of that, you have more of a knowledge of, or more of a focus on the business side of it. Um, you know, yeah.
Uh, Being an American pianist, you know the American school of pianism
Mm,
was very strong in the 1950s. Van Cliburn went to Moscow. He won the Tchaikovsky competition. Gary Graffman, Leon Fleischer. I mean, it was a very strong school of pianism, all taught by the European pianists who came to the United States
mm,
as immigrants and taught here, bringing all the old traditions of Russian and German and French, all the wonderful traditions. So these guys played great. And being an American pianist during my generation has different dynamics.
mm,
Uh, it's more about, of course, embracing the tradition, which I do. I studied with Adele Marcus at Juilliard, who was a student of Joseph Levine and Arthur Schnabel. I mean, looking back now, was quite a pedigree, and she was tough, but she knew her
mm,
craft. She knew, and she knew how to teach it well. But she learned new music too. I mean, she played Stravinsky's Capriccio for piano and orchestra. I believe it was the U.S. premiere, I think. But she
mm,
always had an eye for new music and taught it very well. But I've had this sense that in addition to all these wonderful works, I mean, I've done an all Bach recording, a Chopin recording. I've recorded all the Mozart sonatas.
mm,
Uh, Doing all these different things, I still felt this need to build the repertoire, to continue it, make sure we're part of this continuum. And that's why I started the commissioning process. And it is a business. It's also a business of relationships and friendships that build over time. And when I started out, the idea was, well, I went to Juilliard, and
mm,
you win competitions, get management, make a name for yourself, and people will start to gravitate to you and all. But it wasn't always the way of sustaining a career that way. Yes, I won some competitions. I lost some competitions. I had a New York debut. It went very well. The review was great, management and all. But even having management, it just wasn't enough. It
Mm,
wasn't enough. You could be signed with the greatest firms in the world,
mm,
but you're joining a list of others,
yeah.
and it's competitive, and you. I just knew that it wasn't fair.
Mm,
I learned over time it wasn't fair to rely on an agency to make you known. You need, and I used to do things that, I mean, I'm 60 now. I'm looking back when I was in my 20s,
mm,
and I knew it wasn't enough. I was cold calling conductors at home. I was making phone
really.
calls, and they yelled at me for it. Not the conductors; they were great. The manager's like, "What are you doing? You're not supposed to be doing that." But
Yeah.
that's how I built. I mean, I foresaw the future back in the 1980s. I knew that was the way it had to be done.
Um,
And so over time, I built friendships, which led toward getting a lot of orchestras to commission new works. But
mm,
it takes time. Uh, and I mean, I could have just waited it out and become successful doing all the classics, which I love doing. Would it have happened? I don't know. But I knew I had to do something.
mm.
And I felt that it was a win-win for everybody to commission new music. And this work by Fahad is going to be wonderful. I mean,
I
it
would
gives me
love to
such
hear that. Yeah.
it just gives me a wellspring of joy to
Mm,
an honor to be able to help composers, whether they're in their 80s or they're in their 20s. But it's
mm.
exciting. Yeah, I can't call Beethoven. I can't
Yeah.
say, well, do you want a half pedal on that? Do you want a quarter pedal? Oh, your piano may be a quarter pedal.
Yeah.
My piano
Yeah.
may be very
Yeah.
little. I can't ask him, but
Yeah.
I could call a composer and say,
Yeah.
do you want that short? Do you want that long? Should I slur that? Should I pedal
Amazing.
it?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's great. And
Yeah.
actually, working with living composers has helped me interpret all the traditional music
Oh, okay.
so much differently, so much more vividly, more like fresh and now, and stripping it of everything that's been done with it since it's been composed. I treat it like it's a new piece in the time that it was written. It's it's helped
Mm.
over time. Yeah.
Oh, that's so wonderful that you do that and that you give this uh, opportunity then also and help the composers because I think it's also important that we hear new music and uh, that there are a platform or a place for new projects to come up and be heard.
Today's new music is tomorrow's old music.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But
definitely.
I always figure, let's say it's 2050,
Mm,
and some pianist is looking back to 2000, 2010, 2020, 2030. Where's the music?
mm,
And there's a lot that has been. I can't imagine that all the pieces I've commissioned. I shouldn't say that. I don't commission them. Donors
mm,
and orchestras commission them. That all the projects I've created will not be performed during my
mm,
lifetime. Not all of them. Some of them have had performances by other pianists, which is great, but it would be ill-advised of me to imagine
mm,
that all these pieces are going to become greatest hits.
mm,
No pieces really are performed so frequently when they're new. Some orchestral pieces are, but for concertos, it does take decades
mm,
and generations for them to catch on. There are some pieces that I've gotten commissioned that I know will be,
mm,
and they will. Maybe some that I would expect to will be, but they'll be available.
mm.
That's important. It
Yeah,
represents a time in history when they're written. That's important.
I I agree. I think so too. And I think that's something that, like you say, that will be looked back on, and the evidence would be there. Yeah.
Hopefully, yes.
Yeah, Jeffrey, it was so lovely to talk to you and so insightful. And yeah, I learned so much from artists that I talked to, and this was really very interesting what you're doing, and great that you've done that for Farhad as well. And I
He's
would love,
wonderful.
yeah,
He's
I would love
wonderful.
to hear this piece. One, because it's a love story, and two, because I just think it is so amazing that he's done it, that he's done all that. And being a pharmacist as
It's
well.
amazing.
Isn't
I
it
think it's,
amazing?
when
Yeah,
he told me that, I was like, wow. But
yeah,
that shows there's a sense of an academic mind happening too.
mm,
He's very learned and he's always reaching out to learn. And I never felt uncomfortable suggesting something that I think might work better
mm,
because I played a lot of concertos. So
yeah,
I could say, that doesn't feel comfortable. I
mm,
know what you want, but it just doesn't
mm.
fit the hand. And it's interesting that people who are not pianists write very differently for the instrument, and the
Oh,
sounds have been very interesting. Pianist composers, you know what you're going to get. Non-pianist composers, it's a different sound,
oh, okay.
and I really like that in a way because they write for the piano in ways that we're not used to.
Mm, mm.
So it's cool. I like it. But
That's
he's terrific, and it would be so nice to find. I mean, this would have been done much sooner, but of course,
mm,
we're lucky to be alive, and if things
mm.
will happen later than they were expected, that's okay too. If
Yeah.
we need
Well,
to
I believe
wait.
everything happens at the right time. So
Absolutely.
it will happen at the right time. Yeah.
I agree.
Jeffrey, would you mind if I post this on YouTube and
Absolutely.
Facebook? Okay,
Sure. Sure.
wonderful.
I think the more we share and the more people see what we share,
Mm,
especially such good things,
mm,
it just fosters more good things. I think we need to
exactly.
just feed
Mm,
off of each other and uh, just spread the love and make sure these good things happen. Because
mm,
sometimes these are things we're afraid to do or think, oh, I can't do that, and
mm,
then you're like, oh yes, you can,
mm,
and I find it to be very rewarding to do these. I mean, looking back, I mean, I could look somebody in the eye and say, I'm not a millionaire.
mm,
Like everybody else in any business, we scrape to pay our bills. It's true. It's not like I'm playing 150 concerts a year and money is no issue. Not true. But I could look back and remember all the people I've worked with who have collaborated with me in these projects and say, I may not be rich in my wallet, but boy, my heart is full,
mm,
very full. And it's like what Justice Ginsburg has said, you've got to do things that are bigger than yourself
mm,
and for others and for a purpose.
mm,
So doing this piece about her in October is special. I wrote a piece also about Justice Ginsburg. It's a reflection of justice on
mm.
my YouTube channel. It's there, and that will be premiered with orchestra
Oh,
after Ellen
okay.
Swillick's piece. It'll be
Mm,
fun. I've never performed anything I've ever written with an orchestra. I have one of my
really?
wonderful students orchestrate it, and it's there's as I get older, I just find there's more to life than just the money you can make. I mean, it's
Mm,
you need it. My teacher used to say, money, it's like technique. She'd say technique is like money. It
mm.
isn't everything, but without it, you can't do anything.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But it's
Yeah,
important. I
yeah.
enjoy these interviews and sharing this
Mm,
part of music making that is so important.
yeah. No,
So please
I
post
do
it, share.
yeah, no, I do think that, the more we hear and the more um, we hear why artists do certain things, and more a bit of an insight. I think it's very important that we hear that as well.
Now I have a
From
dream.
mm,
My dream is to play all the Mozart concertos in Vienna one day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that
Well,
would be
it
fun.
might just come true
Or
because,
all the piano sonatas. I could do the
yeah,
cycle.
okay. We should express our dreams and then our wishes, and then they come true. I believe
Yes,
that. Yeah.
perhaps, perhaps. Well, thank you so much for taking
Thank
your
you,
time
Jeffrey.
to share all of this. And
No, I,
please
I gladly, I'll do it gladly. Okay.
stay
Okay, Jeffrey,
safe.
have a
Stay
lovely
safe.
day.
Thank you. You too. It's a pleasure to
Okay.
meet you here.
Pleasure to meet you too.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye.
Bye bye.